Disclaimer. This video is not super organized. The subject of tonight's video introduces a number of themes and questions in no intended specific order and with very little guidance. To reflect this, tonight's video will be a little more chaotic in its presentation. I'll be jumping around a lot. This is intentional. Let it all wash over you. This video will also include spoilers. I'm going to ask you a question in just a second. It is a question that does technically have a correct answer. I'm not going to fake you out and say, oh, the right answer is the one that's in your heart, because, confusingly, this question isn't really about its own objective answer. I won't even give it to you in this video. I'll explain what I mean about all that in a second after you give me your answer, but before you respond, take a second to really ponder the question, take in its nuance. Maybe pause and do some journaling, a little meditation, then get back to me. Okay, here's the question. Do you think you could fry an egg on the top of Mount Everest? Note my phrasing. Not, do you think someone could fry an egg on the top of Mount Everest, or do you think it's possible to fry an egg on the top of Mount Everest? No. Do you think that you could do it? Art is a medium that is wholly reliant on the subjective experience. It physically exists in the same medium for every member of its audience. Paint on a canvas, chords and rhythm, clay shaped one way or another, but the experience it gives, the questions it answers, the emotions and conversations it evokes, they're fluid, impossible to define or nail down, but more powerful than what would have spawned from a more practical question or prompt. There may or may not be an intended reaction or interpretation from the artist, but more often than not, when taking in their work in a museum or even simply a picture, when the artist is not presently there to defend their own interpretation, we sort of default to a death of the author/artist mindset. It's not about what they wanted, it's about what we got. Which is the interesting thing behind the question, do you think you could fry an egg on the top of Mount Everest? A question posited by several characters to each other in the 2024 game Arctic Eggs by the Water Museum. Like I said earlier, it's a question with a real scientific answer. You can Google it if you want. But more interesting than the answer to the simple hypothetical are the individual human responses these characters have, pondering themselves, the world, their motivations for answering one way or another, the reasoning behind the question being asked in the first place, and any number of other subjective rabbit holes the human brain might lead them down. It's not about the truth. The truth exists, but it's not what the question is about. So tonight, I'd like to talk about art, motivation, and the human subjectivity that makes life so beautiful, even in the bleakest of circumstances. And apparently, the best way to do that is to talk about the first time you see the art style for Arctic Eggs, with its jagged yet undulating lines, its confusing and unsettling classic cyberpunk character designs, and its gritty, washed-out colors and sounds, you might be tricked into thinking you're about to have a horrifying experience. And maybe you are. I can't guess exactly how you're going to react to this game's narrative and gameplay loop. That's partially what this video is about in the first place, but in my experience, I was surprised to find how much heart, life, and maybe even peace existed in this setting we find ourselves dropped into. The story takes place in Antarctica, in 2091. A society has been established there, living in looming gargantuan buildings interlaced with crisscrossing platforms and staircases. From the very beginning of our playthrough, we get the impression that there's a lot more to this world and what happened to it than we've been initially presented with. There are soldiers walking around everywhere, not really doing anything. They aren't even bothering anyone, surprisingly. These are not the soulless, militech, corrupt occupying militia we're used to seeing in games and settings like these. These just kinda actually seem like regular people who just happen to be soldiers. You know, like how it's actually supposed to work. There's a stillness to everything. Sure, people are mobile, going to get food, going to clubs, going for swims, but you get the impression, even from very early on, that no one's going anywhere because there's kinda nowhere to go. In fact, you sort of know this to be the case. In the beginning, when you're being introduced to the gameplay of the game, which we'll get to in a second, you're told that you've had the majority of your functions stripped away for trying to escape. Okay, so we're trapped, for some reason. Maybe everyone here is. There's some good, if a little vague, motivation for us. Not just to get out, but to figure out exactly why we've been trapped in the first place, and if there's even a good reason to try to escape this area. It's cold and artificial here, but there's food, community, things to do. But a prison cell with a fresh coat of paint is still a prison cell. In this game, we play as someone called a poultry peddler, which is a fancy title for what is essentially a mobile chef position. Our main recipe of choice? Eggs. The core gameplay of Arctic Eggs is walking around, talking to all of the people living in this bleak futuristic city, and preparing food for those who are hungry. Sounds simple, right? Well, at first, it is. It takes a second to get used to the physics of the pan. You need to flip the eggs to fry them on both sides, which can be a little difficult before you understand your grip and your pan, but once you get it figured out, it's not too difficult. That is, until the people you're feeding start adding their own ingredients to your pan. Stuff like cigarettes that act as little timers, cockroaches that constantly try to crawl out of the pan, drinks and ice cubes that can melt or spill and make things way harder, and a bunch of other chaotic factors. Some people want more eggs than others. A few people don't end up ordering eggs at all. But we feed them all the same. We have to reach our goal. As mentioned earlier, the character we're playing as, the nameless poultry peddler, tried to escape this Antarctic city at some point before, and was clearly caught, though the story doesn't specify how. This is the reason you can't speak, can't do anything but walk around and cook. You're still clearly desperate to leave this place, though why you want to leave isn't clear. You can decide that for yourself. What is clear is that there's only one potential avenue for finding escape. As the game gets going, your attention is occasionally directed to this large spire located centrally between all the locations you'll be visiting during your brief egg run. Inside of this structure is a man known as the Saint of Six Stomachs. This man is never overtly described, is never given a name beyond his strange, grandiose title, and never leaves the building he resides in. Certain dialogue implies that he was a human at one point, but likely doesn't resemble that form anymore. Apparently, the Saint is the only one who can grant escape to the people living here. And with this whole stomach thing and your new position as poultry peddler, it seems your best bet to getting on his good side would be to feed all of his subjects, and maybe him as well. You can't get access to him unless you fed everyone else, or at least most people, so the journey begins. All of this, everything I just explained and described, it's what the game looks like, and is technically about, but it's not what the game feels like. Arctic Eggs feels like a mix between a conversation, a dream, and a memory. You'd think that in a setting as strange and distinct as this one that all the dialogue would be about the current situation and setting, but shockingly, a great deal of the dialogue, either that which is directed at you or shared between other characters, is about completely unrelated ideas or themes. This was intentional by the creator, who in an interview said that he didn't enjoy writing dialogue about the world as much, as he felt the player's satisfaction from learning something about the setting could only work if information was infrequent and unexpected. Occasionally, you'll get some solid lore about the world or its history, vague ideas referencing a war with Argentina, dolphin soldiers, something about flamingos, the Saint of Six Stomachs eating manta rays. Interesting, chaotic, untethered bits of lore, fascinating, sure, adding to the overall experience, absolutely. But it is the conversations not about this Antarctic city, not about the Saint, not about the strangeness on display, that are the most intriguing. It's a game about art and the creative process. It would be impossible to divorce the influence of the city from any conversation in the game, even those that don't directly mention any of it by name, because quite like in the creative process, there is a silent acknowledgement that even if I didn't put the name of the city in my title, it's still where the piece was painted. You can't escape the influence of your surroundings, unless you blind yourself to it, metaphorically, of course. But what art benefits from blindness? What art benefits from soullessness? Art is not utility. It does not follow a strict structure, despite what certain pretentious individuals might try to convince you. It is meant to be a reflection, an illusion, a reference, if not to a physical truth, then an emotional one. One that, I'd argue in most cases, cannot be reached with your hands over your ears and your eyes shut. Because of this, the conversations that aren't about what's going on around you, that aren't about Antarctica or the Saint, they still kind of are. Those factors are the context for these conversations, which are about the world, about the creative process, about individual experiences and why we encounter them. When someone asks about whether it's possible to fry an egg on the top of Mount Everest, you can choose to hear that question as, is it physically possible from a scientific standpoint? Or you can choose to hear it as, is it possible to leave this place? Or do I have the strength to make such a journey to Everest, not to mention the top in the first place? Or conversely, do you have the strength to make said journey? Some people don't even ask if it's possible. They just tell you they're going to. One man reacts to his friend saying this, claiming that the only reason she told him this in the first place is to set expectations for herself. Regardless of how you hear the hypothetical, the acknowledgement of its difficulty is unavoidable, as even the mention of Mount Everest, including in our real world, is typically synonymous with an extreme challenge. So when she says, "I'm gonna do it," her friend posits what she's really doing is making herself feel better. According to him, it's not something people would expect her to be capable of accomplishing, and she knows that, so there's no way for her to lose if everyone has reasonable expectations. If she fails, if she can't fry her egg on top of that mountain, no harm or embarrassment. No one thought she was going to be able to anyway. Nothing's changed. If she does, she gets the recognition for her achievements, the admiration of everyone for being wrong. It's a win-win. Unsurprisingly, the woman is a little frustrated being told something like this. It's not a super chill move to immediately tear down and deconstruct your friend's goals in a situation like this. However, I do think there's an oddly familiar, surprisingly relatable friendliness to this personal analysis. There's nothing like a good conversation with a peer, especially when it's about something completely random and unimportant. The moments where you and a friend can tackle an important real-world issue are valuable and memorable, but there's nothing like a late-night hypothetical examined at every angle by a pair of friends who know each other well. This breakdown of the friend's intentions and character, while a little harsh, is a great indication of how well these friends know each other, and how much genuine thought he is giving to his friend's words. And this little moment is one of the many where, despite the bleak, cold, alien setting, warmth and kindness break through, even in the strangest of locations. You visit a prison area during your egg-frying journey where you serve prisoners and guards alike. There are some weird moments here, as the game is full of them, but notably, there's not some deep animosity between the guards and the prisoners with their strange robotic helmets? Or maybe literally just heads? It's hard to tell. The prisoners don't hate the guards for keeping them here. In fact, they hardly mention it at all. If the whole city is a prison, maybe that takes the sting out of being in an actual one. Or maybe it just doesn't matter. The prisoners and the guards alike seem more interested in philosophizing and raising cockroaches than critically examining their own situation. Or maybe they're just doing it in their heads. Games in this format, sometimes referred to as walking simulators, are so interesting to me. Usually the quality of the experience is wholly dependent on the writing, as that's the primary method of storytelling. Arctic Eggs has the whole frying pan gameplay thing going for it, but some games literally just have you going from location to location, seeing or hearing dialogue until the story's conclusion. And again, that can be fine if the story is captivating enough, but one aspect of the genre that always intrigues me is how the developer decides to deliver the story, the medium the information comes through. In What Remains of Edith Finch, your journey through the house is a narrated letter from the eponymous late Edith to her son. Firewatch has you talking to someone over the radio. In the Stanley Parable, the narrator is a character himself, one who responds to your actions. These little unique ways of giving information and objectives to both the character and the player adds to the playing experience and makes your journey that much more memorable. Which is why it's interesting that in this game, you A, play a character who lacks the ability to speak, and B, receive information about the game and the world exclusively by listening to dialogue given by people living in the city, often unprompted and in response to nothing more than your presence. The world, the people within it, they want to be known, even the most disillusioned or angry of them. In those cases, they want you to know their anger, their dissatisfaction in the same way the others want you to know their dreams, goals, or simply just what kind of meal they want prepared. Learning about the world this way, infrequently relevant, always presented from a biased or subjective source with no way to respond or follow up, it's a super captivating format and makes this experience just a little bit more complex. The most interesting factor of this game, however, in my opinion, is examining your own motivation. A motivation that you get to choose. Are you cooking these eggs simply to get an audience with the Saint of Six Stomachs as a way to leave this place? Are you fulfilling some kind of duty, just doing what you have to for the good of everyone, escape, just a happy bonus? Or is there a part of you that genuinely enjoys the process, that is doing it for the love of doing it? Maybe you're one of those people who screw around in the sandbox mode after beating the main story. Now, spoiler time, you do end up escaping if you play through the entirety of the game. No matter what motivation you decide on for yourself, once you prepare the final meal, which we'll talk about in just a second here during our conclusion, you're given your freedom and are allowed to leave to pursue what you've always wanted. But before I describe specifically what that is, I want to finish this thought about motivation. As I mentioned earlier, this egg cooking process is a pretty clear stand-in for the larger general creative process. Painting, sculpting, writing, it can be whatever is most relevant to you as long as it's about creation. But why do different creators make their art? Can you really say Miyazaki and Ito operate the same way? Have the same goals, the same mindset? Did Van Gogh and Monet? Bach and Beethoven? Of course not. It's a stupid question to ask even rhetorically. For one thing, their styles and techniques are all different, define different movements and ideas, but further than that, they create for different reasons. Now, I won't pretend to know these reasons, but let me translate this from eggs. Are you cooking just to escape is actually, are you creating just to reach the end, to finish your piece? When I ask, are you cooking out of responsibility, I'm actually asking, are you creating out of some obligation, some deadline or job that requires it? When you hear the question, are you cooking just because you enjoy it, what you should really be hearing is, are you creating simply because you enjoy it? For the love of the act. It's silly to use something so mundane as cooking eggs to cover these complex topics, these very human questions and ideas. But this translation is reflective in itself of exactly what the game is drawing attention to, the malleability of art and creation. The game does sometimes compliment you on how your preparations look or taste, but more often than not, the game praises or criticizes you for how you prepared it, not how it turned out. It's not about the product for the people, though that's always an element of it. It's about the process. And for the Saint, I think it's about that too, in a weird, removed, regretful sort of way. When you eventually meet the Saint of Six Stomachs, you realize why he's called that. His body has been completely deconstructed, organs and flesh kept in eerie suspended containers, watching you quietly from the darkness, as you do what you've been doing the whole time. You cook a meal for a hungry person. The Saint of Six Stomachs is not a talkative person, if you can even call him that anymore. It takes a while to cook his eggs for him. He wants a lot. After we cook the final egg, though, he gives a fascinating bit of final dialogue.
Can you fry eggs on top of Mount Everest? Never thought about it. Perhaps it's irrelevant. For me, anyway. But still.
And the game ends. But not really. After the credits roll over a jet flying across the ocean, we found ourselves crash-landed on Mount Everest. We know why we're here, or why we're maybe supposed to be here. But as we walk to the peak of the mountain, it might occur to us that we dropped the pan. We have no instrument to fry any egg. It doesn't matter. At the peak of the mountain, a place that in reality represents the ultimate triumph, the conclusion of an epic struggle, and a testament to humanity's unconquerable will and the drive to go beyond our own limitations, is a chicken. It lays no egg, we fry no egg. Someone else will have to answer the question. As we stroke this chicken, exhibiting potentially the most tenderness we've ever seen in this world, the true ending comes. The screen fades to black, and as it does, we ponder the question. Is it possible to fry an egg on the top of Mount Everest? Maybe. Maybe not. It wasn't ever really about finding out. Maybe we thought it was, and maybe for someone else it really is, but now, Here, at the top of the world, we just share a human moment with an animal we found ourselves oddly tied to, no longer a tool or a burden. We've been guided here by a question that requires no answer. The unknown leads us to a simple but powerful revelation, an understanding, the chaotic truth, the creative act in its purest form. Peaceful, joyful, satisfying, enigmatic, and yet always unfinished.